We're joined by Professor Sheena Riley, who is the Director of Speech Pathology at the University of Melbourne. Good morning, Professor. So tell us, what is the research showing us about speaking to our babies?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here to talk about this subject. It's something I'm very passionate about. The short answer is it's never too early to talk to your baby. In fact, there are studies of what babies remember and recall as early as when they're in their mother's womb. So, for example, when babies are born, they can recognise voices and they can certainly recognise particular theme tunes, for example, to television programs. So their brains are attuned to what's happening in their environment very early on.
Do they recognise the different... Sorry to interrupt you there, but are they recognising the different tone in your voice? I mean, is that, you know, an angry tone or a sort of a comforting tone? Is that also part of it?
Absolutely. And when babies are listening to you well before they're able to talk or even understand words, they're learning all the skills about how words actually form, and that speech is made up of different blocks, and those blocks are actually words. They also recognise and tune into voices that are familiar to them. So very quickly they know their parents' voices and they can discriminate those voices from a stranger's voice.
Now, Professor, I think we're all guilty of this, but when we do see a baby or a young child, we tend to coo and goo and gar and that sort of thing. Now, according to this, perhaps that's not so helpful.
Oh no, the cooing and gooing and garring is really important.
Oh, good.
Babies love it, and it's a very important part of interacting with babies. And that's how they start to learn to take turns. So you coo at them, they coo back, they smile, you smile. So it's all a process of turn taking and learning that communication and language is an exchange. So it's very important.
Is there any research to show whether one sex or the other speaks earlier? I mean, is it, you know, is there any links between the biology, or is it about, is there sort of, do you ever see that people actually speak differently to boys and girls?
There is a lot of interesting research about differences between boys and girls, and certainly girls seem to accelerate much faster with their language. That's a generalisation, but it's a finding in a number of studies. So, say by 2 years of age, girls tend to have much larger vocabularies, so they say many more words than boys. But this gap closes very quickly, and by 4 and 5 you don't see those differences anymore.
Now, Professor, your research has looked at demographics across the scale, including different socio-economic backgrounds. Is there some link in terms of those from a more privileged background and those from a lower socio-economic background in terms of how early their kids speak, or is that not a factor at all?
Look, not how early children speak, because children's desire to speak seems to be an innate or biological thing. It's pretty hard to stop them once they start. You know, it's a great way of engaging the world around you. So we very much think that early speech and language is biologically driven. What happens after that seems to be very much affected by your environment. It won't give you a problem, but it might make your speech and language development less rich. So, for example, there is a steep social gradient between the number of words a child has and how disadvantaged your background is. So children from more disadvantaged backgrounds tend to have smaller vocabularies. It doesn't mean that they actually have an impairment, which is a biological problem, but it does mean that they might start school, for example, with less well-developed language skills.
Is there a link between speaking directly to your child, so addressing something, you know, do you want this food, or even saying no, to them just actually hearing conversation in the house? Are both equally as important, or is there actually a real gain to directing your conversation to the child?
Oh, there's no doubt that directing conversation to a child is extremely important. Earlier I mentioned turn taking. That's a really important social convention that we all learn. We know that we take turns, we don't interrupt and so on. And it is very important that young children learn that. Now, they can learn just by listening to what's happening in their environment. You could put them in front of a television and they could hear language and learn to understand things. But it's not the same and it's not as rich as that interaction that happens.
Okay. I'm sorry, Professor, to cut you off. I'll let you finish quickly.
I was just going to say, you know, there's no substitute for actually using just everyday occurrences for interacting with your baby, your child. It's never too early to start, and you can talk about anything.
Okay, Professor Sheena Riley, thank you for your fascinating research.
Thank you.